Okay, good day, Ontario Education Online students. We're going to begin our lesson about archaeology. So I'm going to share my slideshow with you. All right, so when we think of archaeology, we often think of really old things, right? So we think of bones, we think of maybe pottery, we think of things like the step pyramids, old coins. People like to go around digging, and sometimes they take their metal detectors and they try to see if they can find any old treasures, right? So archaeology really does mean the idea, it comes from ancient things. It's a Greek word, archaea, ancient things, and logos means science or theory. So we're studying the theory of ancient things, we're studying the science of ancient things. So archaeology really is a study of the material remains of the past. Without it, we would know very little about the ancient world. Okay, so we study the early humans, we learn what they did, what they were interested in, we learn about what they ate, we learn about their culture, sometimes we learn about their spirituality. And so really, to understand old history, early period of history, we look at the physical remains of things. So archaeologists are kind of like detectives. They look for the physical clues of the past, and they try to piece things together. The problem is not everything is perfect. Not everything is got all the pieces. So you have to put things together. So what archaeologists do is they go to these dig sites and they spend a lot of their time analyzing the materials that they discover. So, if you're interested in becoming an archaeologist, you're going to need to have a lot of patience, perseverance, because it's not like the movies. It's not like when you watch Indiana Jones, or it's not like when you watch the shows like, I don't know, The Curse of Oak Island, or any of those other historical, like, exploration type shows. It's not like that instant gratification, right? So sometimes, depending on where you are for the dig sites, it's very hot. You have to deal with all continuous kinds of issues that may be nearby. Now, why do they excavate? If they excavate because they need to look for evidence about past environments. They look at seeds, animal bones, soils. Those are called ecofacts. Evidence of things that people made or did that can't be moved, like a house or the base of a hearth. These are called features. Then we also look at the tools that they used, right? So these are artifacts, pottery. If there's the arrowheads, these are artifacts. Then we also look at organic materials. So these are things like remains of humans or of animals, and they're fossilized remains. Okay, so sometimes those fossilized remains leave impressions in stones or in the soil. And sometimes they are preserved in the earth, and those are called fossils. Okay, so these are some just examples of the different kinds of things that archaeologists find. So how do they find these sites? Well, obviously, archaeologists know that the environmental factors that humans have always needed in order to stay alive. So this could mean that we need access to water. So we do know that a lot of places will set up their civilizations near water because it's necessary. So with this information in mind, they study the maps and they look at potential places where older prehistoric people might have lived. Then they look at, they learn sometimes of various sites, because sometimes when digs begin with construction companies, they find things and then they have to call the appropriate people. And then archaeologists come on site and they start to investigate, and uncover the artifacts. Is this a place where we can continue digging or not? Because sometimes digging for construction companies would have to stop at that point. Sometimes it's even found, these places are found because farmers are doing their farming, they're planting, they're harvesting, and then they find these particular fields and then they let people know, right? So obviously, archaeologists kind of need the help of a lot of different groups of people to help them find these different sites. So once they find the artifacts, then what happens? So obviously they study to find the various sites to unravel the mysteries, and then they call on other people to also assist. So you have anthropologists that study the origin, development, distribution, social habits, and culture of humans. So they're specialists about humans and ancient humans and how they developed. But you have paleontologists, are the people that examine fossil remains of animals and plants, and they study the geological period. So someone who's interested in the dinosaurs would be a paleontologist. Then you have the paleoanthropologists, which combine the work of both of those fields. Okay, So again, this is a very valuable field to go into because we still don't know a whole heck of a lot of our history. Now, in order to date things, they use something called radiocarbon or carbon-14 dating. This actually was the creation of a physicist named Willard F. Libby in 1948. And so carbon C14 or carbon 14 is an unstable radioactive form of carbon. And then what they do is they take a look at that, and all forms of living have some ratio of the C14 atoms. So when an organism dies, then so does the C14. And so when we look at the carbon dating, then we'd say, well, how much of the C14 is left? If not very much is left, that means it must be much older. Okay. And when we think about the rate of decay of something, so how quickly something dies, it's referred to as a half-life. So the half-life of C14 is 5,730 years, 5,730 years. So that means in 5,730 years, half of the C14 will have been decayed. So we can guesstimate timeframes and ages of things based on the C14. Now, if something's even older than that, then they look at something called thorium decay. And in rocks, the decay of potassium they look at, and argon they can look at. Okay, so that's something that, or rubidium or strontium is used to things that are dating things that are billions of years old. So archaeologists have many different methods that they use to measure things. They can also use the amount of thermoluminescence that are on pottery when they heat something. Now, in the 1980s, a doctor at the University of Toronto also developed another new dating technique using lasers. So now they can use more of a accurate date using this method called single microscopic crystal of a volcanic material. Now, obviously, as with any kind of science, archaeology is not perfect. There are problems. So obviously it can be limited to certain things like climate, the environment, even human encroachment. So if things are touched or affected by humans, it can impact the artifact or even affect the dating of something. Archaeologists' culture, religious, or political bias may also blur scientific research because, again, as we look at things, we are human beings, and human beings are not perfect. So sometimes our biases do present themselves, even if we're supposed to be professional and we're supposed to have this scientific background to us. And also, depending on where we are, sometimes governments and power may limit archaeological finds, or they might even take the interpretations. And sometimes someone's personal ambition may take the interpretations of the facts. Maybe they're really excited, they really believe it to be one thing, but then, and they really try hard to prove that, but it comes across incorrect, right? And then we look at the existing interpretations or theories that may also color the interpretation of the finds. So these are just some things that show us that archaeology is not a perfect science. So this is the beginning, as I said, of understanding human beings, and archaeology is the main study of that.